Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Art and Talk is an online interviewing platform for artists to share their art, creativity, and passion. We embrace all the arts, the traditional arts and the spiritual arts, to bring you diverse and quality interviews to watch and be inspired by. If you are an artist and you'd like to be interviewed on Art and Talk, just send an email to us at viewoftheartist@gmail.com and we'll get back to you with scheduling and information. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk, and today we'll be continuing with presenting you a collection of artists that currently have artwork at the biennial exhibit, which is at the Cultural Council of Palm Beach County here in Lake Worth, Florida. And it's an amazing group of artists, many that are pushing the boundaries of traditional ways we think and view art and opening some interesting conversations to expand the definitions of art. If you're local, you definitely want to check out this exhibit at the Cultural Council, again in Lake Worth, Florida. And if you're not local, you can go on our Facebook page and we have a link that'll give you a little bit more information that you can read about the biennial exhibit. So let's go ahead and get started with our guest artist today. She bridges both her background of science and art into her artwork, and we're going to find out all about her beautiful work. So let's go ahead and welcome Carol Prusa. Carol, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, we're so grateful to have you here and to find out about your beautiful artwork. Before we dive into that, you're kind of serving as a bridge to both your love of science and both your love of art, and then kind of representing that. So tell us in your own words, about your art, and if you could share with us a little bit about your background, if you would, Carol.
Okay. Yeah. Well, primarily, I'm interested in why things are the way they are. And I think that's the domain of both art and science. I think that art expresses it quite differently than science. But I started out in the sciences because I knew nothing about art. And I never took art in grade school, never had art. It was cut out of the Chicago school system. And so it wasn't really until I went to college and I was majoring in chemistry, pre-med, that I ran across the path of somebody who was actually studying art. And then it became very clear to me that there was a big void in my education because I did not know anything about art at all. And so I thought in order to be an educated person, I needed to take that up and take a class. And the class that was available to me was beginning drawing with Mr. Lynch at the University of Illinois. And it was, for one thing, it was a fantastic class. I thoroughly loved it and enjoyed it. Had no idea I would be good at it, and it turned out that I was. And also turned out that Mr. Lynch, he must have seen something in me, because I remember one day we were drawing and he said, "Hey, I have something to show you." And he took me to his office and he had torn this image out of Art News magazine and he handed it to me and said, "You could be this good." I would wish that every artist would have somebody like a Mr. Lynch in their life that would express that kind of belief in them that they too could be an artist. And that was when I thought, oh, but wait a minute, I'm, pre-med chemistry, I'm not an art major, I'm not an artist. So I had to come to terms with that. And that took a little bit more time. What I ended up doing was getting a degree in medical illustration, which was called biocommunication arts. And it was 4 years of professional work at the University of Illinois, taking art classes and science classes, and then 2 years of professional work at the University of Illinois Medical School campus, where I took embryology, pathology, histology, all anatomy, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a real interesting background, and how auspicious with the first of all that you were open enough to take the drawing class, which was really kind of in a sense out of the domain of what you were currently studying. But as you said, Carol, you wanted to kind of like broaden your horizons and kind of be a little bit more as you said, kind of educated in taking this drawing class. That led to the openness. And then the teacher that encouraged you, what a beautiful story that is.
Yeah, I'm very thankful to him. As a teacher myself now, I work to remember that, to really support my students and help them find, their own their own source and belief in themselves.
Mhm, mhm. So you spend your time, let me know if this is correct, kind of vacillating between being a college professor and then also time in your studio creating your own work.
That is correct. Yeah, I teach full time at Florida Atlantic University, full professor. So I've been actually a professor for 40 years teaching, and I retire actually next year from teaching, but I'll certainly continue my studio work. I try to balance my time between the two, but I never not work at least 20 to 40 hours on my own work a week. You know, I can't even imagine not making my own work.
Mhm, mhm. You have that strong drive
Mhm.
within you to create and to learn and to grow. And it seems like a quest for kind of coming to terms with the world, with the known and the unknown. And you know, as we were saying, kind of like bridging that gap between art and science and representing it in a way that works for you.
The science still interests me a great deal, and I read a lot, mostly like pop physics. You know, I don't understand at the level that somebody has a degree in mathematics would. I'm certainly really curious about it, and I'm really curious particularly about cosmologists in physics because they're trying to come up with a theory that describes why we are the way we are. And you know, the thing that I find most beautiful and strange is the fact that we exist at all. You know, so how did we begin? We can go back, the billions of years ago to the Big Bang, but what was there before that? And these are the kind of questions that are really interesting to me, and how if we start at the Big Bang, then we're all tethered to it, and if we're all, which we are all tethered to that singularity, and if we're all tethered to that singularity, then we're absolutely all interconnected. And we could talk another time probably about what time means and how does time play into it. But it's a very beautiful thought, the fact that everything is one thing, So in my art, I pursue ideas like that. I like to read about particularly women scientists, women astronomers. Um, all that stuff is kind of like is fuel for my work, or put my mind in kind of a state that I can make my work. But my work is highly abstract.
Mhm. I love that, Carol, how we're all one thing. And would you say that that is kind of like the overlighting of your work, that is that kind of like foundation that kind of like guides you?
Yeah, I think that in reflection, it's always easier when you look back at your life in art to say what it is. But I think my work is all about the all and nothing.
Hmm. Hmm. And in terms of looking at art and science within you and your interests and your creative expressions and you know your interests that you pursue, would you say that it's about 50-50? I mean, it's like it's completely equal, or does one dominate a little bit more? Does it fluctuate? How do you experience that?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that early on, understanding the world through science was more important. But now I certainly privilege the art side of it, and that the art I make does not have to make sense to that knowledge base. Because I think art has to be completely free, so it doesn't have a responsibility to anything outside itself. So it contains its own logic. So my art now, I hope, contains its own logic and language, and really doesn't have to make sense to anything outside of itself.
Wow, that's really deep and profound. I love that, Carol. So the art world for you, you know, it must be free. It must not, you know, be labeled. It has to speak its own language. So in other words, you let it kind of let it be its own like breathing life force. And so maybe before you kind of infuse more of different scientific aspects and principles, and let me know if this is correct. This is kind of like what I'm gathering. Then as you kind of like you know, evolve more, you're now like, okay, wait a minute. The whole art thing, as you said so beautifully, it's not really responsible for anything. You just kind of let it have this whole space and this whole level freedom without putting all these kind of like preconceived things, or all your your interest and fascination with science.
Right. It doesn't have to answer the science, and it doesn't have to explicate science. But reading about science is what puts my mind in a certain kind of position that opens me up to the possibilities of art. Like it's like making a primordial stew. Reading science like does that. It does. It's generative. But in the end, I don't want to illustrate science. Although I'm doing a series of paintings right now where I'm actually writing a lot into the paintings, and also some equations and then diagrams, which seems kind of contrary to what I just said. But that's just like the ground layer, because I'm coming to terms with some new theories that have recently come out in physics, and I want to understand it, like about the big bounce instead of the big bang, and some other things like the Higgs boson particle. And so when I start to absorb new information, I find that the work then kind of will work more specifically with those ideas. But then the resulting painting won't. It'll get submerged. I suspect it'll get submerged into it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. Let's go ahead and let's kind of jump into some of your artwork, if that's all right with you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Give me a moment, and I'll pull up the first slide. All right.
Yeah, this piece is called Cosmic Web. It's a dome. It's 60 inches across and about 12 inches deep. And the white areas are actually light. So that's light showing through the piece. So in order to create the work, it's on a plexiglass dome, 1/4-inch plexiglass. And wherever I don't want light to come through, I have to paint black. And then I paint my other paint on top of that. I work in silver point drawing, which is a really ancient kind of medium. They work with the silver wire to draw with. So it's underdrawn in silver point, and then I run a graphite wash over it. And the idea of the graphite wash is when you do, I studied with a Russian iconographer, and the idea in 15th century Byzantine icon painting method that you want to move from ego-driven to up through layers to cosmic light. In order to do this, ego is you scribe underneath, you underdraw, and that is very determined. It's a very specific act, and you do it, and you know what you're doing. But then you want to open up the cosmological field to possibility. So you grind up pigments, and you use a wash to let those pigments flow on the surface, because if you do that, then the pigments have their own nature and their own character, and they're going to do what they want. And you can't completely control that. And so you have to let go of control and deny your ego, then to allow some new possibility to manifest. And so then you have, in my work, I underdraw with the silver point drawing. I do the wash of brown graphite to open up the cosmological field. And then I heighten with white paint. And the heightening of the white paint is symbolic of the cosmic light, or letting emerge those things that feel necessary to bring out, and let other things sit back in. So I learned that studying Russian iconography, because that's the process actually of making an icon.
Mm-hmm. It's quite an interesting process. It's very involved, and it's interesting how at some point you're not in control anymore, and you just have to kind of like let it happen. So what kind of like happy surprises have come out of that when that you've actually been in that moment where you're like, okay, let's just see what happens, and you're in that moment.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a total failure, but whatever happens, you have to work with it, and it's a very exciting point in time, because it's like you have to respond to it. You have to respond to it in a fresh way, and so whatever you had in mind for the piece is not going to end the way you could have envisioned it, because now this other process has taken over, and so you have to come to it in a fresh new way, which then makes you solve it in a new way. So that what's exciting about working in that process is being open, but trusting that you can still solve it.
Right. Yeah, I imagine there's a huge amount of trust involved, and as you said, openness as well. This is so beautiful, and it feels like, I know you were saying it's a dome structure, with the plexiglass and then the paints and the silver point, and it's so expansive. When I look at it, I feel like I'm like literally peering into, the cosmos, via Carol's, amazing work.
Yeah, each of the lobes around the perimeter, they're built out of forms that relate to the embryo at the indifferent stage before it's male or female, because I studied embryology. So I took forms related to that to accumulate into these lobes. And each lobe is named after a woman astronomer. So like Mariah Mitchell or Jana Levin or any number of astronomers are named. And I actually wrote the names around the perimeter. And the idea is that this biological self or life is their location in life. It's their observatory. So they each have their own observatory and they're casting their light out. But they all worked at the Harvard Observatory. And so they were actually the people who gathered the information about mapping our heavens. And the reason that it was women was that they could be low paid and there was no money. So they hired these women who were incredibly well educated, because women could be well educated. It's just they couldn't get a job with that education. And honestly, the earliest PhD in astronomy from Harvard was a woman. So it's just interesting history. So I looked into that history, and then I made a lobe in honor of each of those women. And then they're casting their vision out, but because they're collaborative, they form a network, and their network is what then ultimately maps the universe.
Wow, that's really fascinating, Carol. So it's also around that perimeter as you're paying homage to women astronomers. And so in essence, even though you're creating this, it's almost like in collaboration with them, because you're paying homage to them, and you're close connection with them, and wanting to kind of like serve and honor them. So it's almost like this kind of feeling of like all of you kind of working together to complete this art piece.
Yeah, I definitely read a lot about these women. And then I went on to actually do a series of etchings where each of the etchings I made honored a specific woman astronomer, and then specifically looked at their research, where the work itself then reflected in feeling tone, but not not like an illustration, but a sensibility related to their research.
Yes, it's absolutely beautiful. Let's go to the next one, if that's all right with you. All right. Okay.
Right, that's an image of my studio. I was really fortunate when I first moved to Florida that I applied for what's called a cultural consortium grant, and I received it. And that gave me the money to move out of my living room. When my children were growing up, they had no idea that people had living rooms. They just thought people had studios because that's what we had, so they didn't know what a couch was. So once I got that award, then I built a studio off the back of my house.
Well, we really get a sense of the scale of your work, and get a nice view of some of your other pieces as well, Carol.
Right, because this picture was from 2 years ago. I'm working on a 60-inch flat circle plexiglass. On the floor, you can see some shallow domes, and then you see some flat square work, and then there's some spheres in the back corner. I make larger spheres. So I work on circles, spheres, domes, and flat panels.
When you're doing the actual the silver coin drawing, Carol, it's very meticulous. Do you almost kind of go into a meditative state?
Oh, thank you for asking that. It's absolutely true. People say, don't you get tired and bored? Because these things take hundreds and hundreds of hours to make. And no, I don't. It's like breathing, the mark making, the hatching, the detail of it is so beautiful for me. I love existing there. I'm very intimate then with the surface and the nuance and subtleties of it. And I've never found it boring or tedious. You know,
Mm.
I love it, and it is very meditative for me.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like you really come alive.
Yeah, it's certainly where I feel most comfortable with myself, and I'm kind of existing fully in myself,
Mm.
and everything else drops away.
Mhm. Um, Carol, when you're in your studio and you're creating, can you give us just a little bit of kind of like a in the moment? Do you like silence? Do you like music? It looks like there's some window light, coming in. What's kind of like your preference, if you have one when you're creating your art? Do you like to have a certain type of environment?
Uh, well, one thing I don't do is to bring my phone out there. And
Mhm.
people are like, how can you not bring your phone? What if something happened? And I was like, well, if something happened, I hope somebody is close by to help. Because nothing I could find out can't wait a couple hours. Because like, what can I do if something happens? So I try to give myself that space of not having my phone or computer there. And then my daughter gave me a bell that she had gotten in Japan. It has a very long ring. So if I walk in my studio, sometimes it's very hard to let go of the day and the daily things that you have to attend to. So I ring the bell, and at the end of the ring, then my mind is really focused and located, and my breathing changes and ready to be in my studio. And I'm not anxious about other things. I just kind of really leave everything else behind. When I'm in my studio, I'm in my studio.
Mm. I'm so glad you share that. So it's kind of like you want a distraction-free space, and you also have this beautiful kind of like protocol ritual with your bell that kind of helps you to go into that space to create your work.
Right, and I think I learned that because when my children were little, it was very hard to find time to work.
Mhm.
And so I had to train my mind to turn on and off. So like if I had people, my students tell me now, oh, if I don't have a couple hours, it's not worth getting started. And I'm like, you have 10 minutes, it's worth getting started. You just have to discipline yourself so that I can get back into things pretty readily because I train myself to, um, be there again, so that I can use 10 minutes if I have 10 minutes.
Right, right. You're a real solution maker. You make a way. You're gonna find a way to make it work.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the next one, Carol. All right.
Yeah, this is a series that was just shown at Manifest in Cincinnati, and it actually was awarded the Manifest Prize, which I feel really grateful for. Um, and each of these circle panels, the largest one is 60 inches, and the smallest is 30 inches in diameter. And they actually all depict the moon. And I had the opportunity to observe the 2017 total eclipse. Um, and so it was a really transformative experience for me. Now, I had read about Mariah Mitchell, who's another American astronomy, and her journey to Denver to see the eclipse. And even Edison, a number of other people have gone to see the eclipse, and Virginia Woolf writes about her experience and how powerful it is. And there's lots of stories about this, but so I wanted to experience it myself. And I thought, certainly it can't be that big a deal because I understand what it is scientifically. But honestly, I went to Nebraska. I'm standing on the Platte River, the bank of Platte River, when the eclipse occurs. And, it's like I lost my grounding and literally fell over when the total eclipse occurred, and with the darkness. And what really kind of blew my mind was Venus popped out in midday. So I could see Venus. I could see this black disk, which was the total eclipse. So it's the moon, just like this sharp black disk in the middle of the sky. And to my left were the colors of like sunset, like warm colors
Mm.
across the river. And then to my right were like colors, palladium, like silver colors, with that crisp moon in the middle, and then Venus popping out. So it's just so it was like so overwhelming, and it's actually so short-lived, right? You have to absorb all this information very quickly. So when I got home from that experience, I made some sketches to try to remember. I didn't photograph, So just some sketches and drawings to have a memory of it. And then I set about making these images. And the idea of my work is there's always the perimeter. That perimeter I consider a liminal space or location where you are the observer. So it's your physical location, it's your body, where you assert your place. And then you look into the void or the center or the mystery or the unknown. And then you try to come to terms with it. And so in this case, I'm trying to come to terms with the eclipse itself by depicting it. With the exception that the far left circle called Selene, which is a moon goddess, is simply a full moon.
Mhm, mhm. I'm going to stop the screen share for just a moment. I just would like to ask you a couple questions. There's a beautiful experience that you just shared with us. And I'm just trying to see if we can kind of step into your shoes a little bit, because you have this vast knowledge of science and with the astronomers and all these different areas that you're well versed in, and kind of understanding the cosmological aspects of the universe, and your openness and beautiful artistic creations. When you are actually out at night, and I'm just imagining you're probably a night gazer, a stargazer. I imagine, because you're so heavily influenced and so passionate about these areas. So if we can just get a little taste of what it's like for you when it's nighttime, the stars are out, maybe there's an eclipse, maybe there's not that event going on, or it could be, and you have this vast knowledge, and you kind of can pull these different areas of your knowledge base of kind of what you're seeing and what's going on. But how does Carol experience this? Like what's going on within you when you see the moon, you see the stars, certain cosmological events? How do you experience it?
Right, and I think it's because there's a sense of vastness to it and beauty, of course. Um, my partner is an amateur astronomer, and he has several telescopes, so I can clearly look through telescopes when I want, and I do. But I like more the direct experience, except for I do love looking at the moon through the telescope, I have to say. That's really kind of striking. But what it interests me at night particularly, and I love to go hiking at night, and I like to ride my bike on the bike trail at night, is night vision, scotopic vision. So it's really intriguing to me of like, what do you see and what do you not see, and what is your brain filling in? And right now I'm really captivated with this idea of night vision, and I'm making a series of paintings called Night Gardens. So like that your mind, you get like kind of buzz or kind of shimmer when you're looking into darkness. You're peering into darkness, trying to understand it in terms of form and space, and what is it exactly that you're seeing. And I'm trying to paint that, even though your mind really isn't seeing what it thinks it sees. I don't know why that interests me. I guess it's that liminal space between the known and the unknown, what you can see and not see, and what you can describe and not describe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so interesting. And it's so like, it's kind of like this night vision, not really knowing what you're seeing, kind of peering into the darkness and into the void, and still kind of like trying to ascertain, kind of like make sense of everything. Do you feel a connection and a rapport, a relationship when you're experiencing this night vision? Is there like any kind of like communication going on?
Well, if I'm looking, say, at the night sky, I just feel incredibly small, and I think, um, you know, then it's kind of, it puts perspective on local time. I think more in astronomical time. I don't, it's interesting because as a teacher, I certainly have students who are depicting things that are much more local or political. Um, things that are occurring in their daily lives. And I've never taught it, I've never thought in those scales. I just don't think in those scales at all. I think both thought in really large scales and large space. And so the feeling of one's own insignificance and the vastness of it all is so beautiful because it's so freeing, right? Because you know that what is going to keep on going in whatever way. You have no control, no ability to, you know, so it's like about acceptance. There's something so profoundly wonderful about, you know, that allows you just to breathe life and accept, and just like how phenomenal to exist at all. The possibility of life is so phenomenal, you know, so those are the kind of things that I think about.
The whole sort of like mystery of life, and kind of being like, in a sense, like on a trajectory to become closer with it, but also like, as you were saying, there's like this acceptance, like, you know, there's also that air of mystery, and almost kind of like a reverence and honoring of that, you know, vastness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been accused of being like kind of Walt Whitman-esque, you know, so a bit maybe romantic about it. But I don't think I'm romanticizing. Um, it's just, um, you know, just to allow oneself to be overwhelmed by the fecundity and immensity of life. Um, and the that's the arena that really interests me in art, and artists who kind of speak or reach to that interest me too.
Yes, yes, beautifully said. Let's go ahead and go to a couple more images, and let's check those out. Give me just a moment. All right.
Oh yeah, this piece is called Unmoored. This is the piece that's at the Cultural Council right now in Palm Beach.
Mhm.
And there's slip cast vitreous china, ceramic, and then at the truncated end of each piece, that's ceramic. Then I did a silver point drawing of the ocean with aluminum leaf at the top. And then if you go from the top to the bottom, you see that the top is completely air and the bottom is completely water. Um, and you know, the term unmoored is, you know, to lose one's grounding, to float. So you could read this piece in a number of ways, but certainly um, people come to it and they think about ocean rising. And I live near the ocean here in Florida, so you know that certainly comes into play. I have to say, I have to admit, as dire and awful as ocean rising is, and that we should do something about it, and we have to make every effort to be environmental. That because I think in really large scales, I'm I'm not like locally upset about it, like in the sense of I don't see it as terrible if the earth becomes water. You know, but I can explain it another way because it sounds awful that I wouldn't be upset. Where I'm upset is that in local time, people are going to hurt and suffer because of it, and that's why we should care for other people and you know, slow down or stop global warming. But in the long term, larger aspect of it, life is resilient and things do what they do, and I'm not upset about it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So
That's
there
a
are some. I'm sorry.
person upset about it. It's just matter of fact, and it's looking at much larger scales than say this century.
Mhm, mhm. Right. All right. We have one more image, unless there was anything else you wanted to mention, Carol, about this one.
Oh well, I did the Vitreous China work at Kohler Artist and Industry Residency in Wisconsin, and it's an artist residency that you can apply for to work in ceramics, and I had never worked in ceramics before.
All right. All right. Very good. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's go to the next one. All right.
Oh yeah, this is a larger sphere and with a programmed internal light. And that was at my exhibition in Taipei, Taiwan, where I have a gallery in Taipei. So I've gone to Taipei a number of times.
Wow. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that piece is called Aurora.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I sort of was thinking too about the lotus, you know, the 1,000-petal lotus. And then, you know, the lotus pod, the seeds look like eyes. So the top of the sphere has these eye shapes, which can also be like seed shapes. But I also was thinking kind of like the Oracle of Delphi and how all these observers are out there collecting information and accumulating and bringing it to the source.
Mhm.
I think about a lot of things. I entertain myself a great deal when I make my work.
Mhm. So some of the inspiration, Carol, comes from nature, from the lotus, kind of like a sphere here with the lotus opening up.
Right, and I studied Tibetan flower painting with a Buddhist monk at Naropa Institute, which is a Buddhist university in Boulder, Colorado. So, I think that my work is influenced by a number of wisdom traditions
Mhm.
and symbol systems.
Mhm. It's absolutely breathtaking.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share. I love everything that you're sharing and the selection of images that we're looking at to get a good feel for, your message and your art. And I see that there's some, societal things that, you want us to take in mind in your art, and also, explore these other areas with you. What are some other messages that you feel you're aiming to convey through your art, Carol?
I think primarily when people come and see my work, I hope that their breathing will slow down, that they'll have this moment. I guess I'm striving for a moment of beauty. I actually think you could deliver beauty. You can't predict the sublime. That's a unique and individual kind of experience. Um, but beauty, one can offer pretty reasonably that most people would find it beautiful. Um, so that that people would come to it as like a location of just to find how strangely beautiful life is and celebrate that. I guess that's what I would hope for my work.
Mm, I love it. The life is strange and beautiful, but also to celebrate that. Yeah. And the forms are very sensual as well. Would that be like a correct territory to go? And it kind of has that feel to it.
Right. I think because we're alive. Life, biological life, is erotic by definition, and so the work does reference that.
Hmm. I have a question, Carol. Some of your pieces that you created that perhaps were a couple years ago, when you start to look at them now, do you have a different view or perspective of them? Do you see them with different eyes, or is there any change going on there?
That's such a great question. There's some work that I truly still love living with, and I think I always will. And then there's some work that I think, oh, it's not how I would do it now, right? Um, and right now I'm moving into a phase of time where I won't be teaching, so I'll be full time on my own work. Um, and I have a determination to make the work that's in me as fully as possible without regard to expectations outside of that. Like without regard to what my galleries might want, or without regard to would anybody want to show it, or would anybody care about it, because um, I, I'm going to give myself the freedom to make the work that's in me to my best ability as fully as possible, which I don't think I have yet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so interesting. And I'm so glad that you shared that, Carol. So you feel like you're at a place where it's like you really want to create for yourself. It's not for any this or that, nothing in the external world. It's like what is still within Carol that wants to be birthed, so to speak, and,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
create.
without fear, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
without judgment. Mm-hmm.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's so beautiful. I'm also wondering because it does seem like these pieces are, time consuming, so to speak. Do you work like one piece at a time totally through? Do you like to have several projects going on and then just kind of like, vacillate between them? How do you like to operate?
Yeah, I usually work on several things at a time. And this was training of, raising kids. I'd have to be in the house at night, or have to be around them when they're around. So I would have projects that were smaller, I would be doing in the house, and I'd have the larger projects in my studio. So now I'm still in that habit, even though my children are grown up, that at night I'll be actually be in the house and I'll work on maybe etching plates then, or smaller drawings or ideas, or smaller pieces, and then the large work I do in my studio during the day.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm interested, Carol, do your pieces speak to you? Like when you have these several projects going on and you're devoting, certain days and times to, move forward with them, do they speak to you in terms of, okay, today I'm going to be working on this one? Like, is there some like internal guidance or the piece actually like speaking in a sense to you, like, okay, it's time to continue with this or time to continue with that? How do you determine which one you're going to work on when you have several projects going on?
Yeah, probably kind of pragmatically, especially if I can have a show. There's parts of my process that are very much like going to a beautiful factory, you know, that I know what I have to do is putting the time in, just do it. And then there's parts of the process that are just much more responsive and engaged, which require that I'm fully there. I can't be tired or I can't be in an off mood, to do it well. So, and then there's parts of a project where I'm originating a body of work that I have to do the research and the thinking and the sketching. And that requires often a lot of reading and submerging myself in these ideas, and writing, I do a lot of writing. So I have those different kind of zones that my work goes through. And so there's certainly some days that I am not creative in the sense I need to be. Then I will sand and gesso panels. So I don't waste time. I always have stuff I have to do, and I'm very good at attending to it. And I'm really good at knowing if I have a block of time where I'm feeling really energized, I would not be sanding a panel during that block of time.
I mean, I see that now. So it's very pragmatic, and a lot of this comes from your experience, and then maybe certain demands of if a piece is due at a gallery and whatnot, and the stages, the whole process in and out, and when you're at this stage, and is it kind of matching up with the time or the feeling that you're in as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some parts of it that I really don't like doing. Well, there's two. I hate varnishing my work. I hate it. And then I hate photographing and documenting it. Like those don't interest me at all, but I have to do them. And so that I will work them in. I write up my list for the week, and I'll put it on the list, and I'll say what day I'm going to get it done, because otherwise I won't do it. I will go into avoidance on certain studio tasks for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. I'm so glad that you shared that. We still have a few more minutes. Tell us something about your art and your process or your love of science that we haven't touched upon yet that you'd like to share.
Yeah, the reason I got into art was because I thought I wouldn't be good at it, and that was exciting because every day I have to wake up and solve something in a new way and learn something new. And certainly this has been true that living in art means always learning new things and being open to new things and coming to terms with new things. So it's a really beautiful life. That part I find really exciting. And then I think because, well, I moved to South Florida and there is quite the art world down here. We have Basel, Miami, and I think, learning to not invest one's merit in that, even though you might, or I do participate in those things, but nobody else can tell you that your art is good or bad. Nobody. You are responsible for your work, and you need to make it what needs to be for you. And so that I've worked on. Yeah, I always tell my students, like what's holding you back from making that thing that you need to make, and why do people bring so much fear to art? And so I think that for myself, that's probably a lifelong process of not just unmediating myself from expectations of others, but asking why am I trying to contain something? What do I fear would happen if people knew the fullness of how I feel or exist, or if I could make that thing that express that completely.
Those are great questions to, to pose to anybody, and then, certainly, with your students as well. What are some of the things, because, you spent, quite some time, devoting yourself to, teaching others and sharing your knowledge and whatnot. What are some of the things that you've learned from your students that was really surprising that you never maybe thought as you went into teaching, like, oh, wow, that really a revelation moment or something, of that nature?
Yeah, I love teaching because it's surprising. You think you come up with an assignment and you tell the students what you want them to do, and then they make these things and you go like, I would have never thought to do it that way, right? Which is so exciting, because you get to live through so many different solutions through that experience, and then you realize that the way you think about things doesn't have to be that way. So it opens you up to, new possibilities. And yeah, the students are amazing that because you have to accept they don't think like you.
So it's like constantly kind of opening your mind and your awareness to oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that, as you said. That was a really cool kind of creation. So it's constant expansion.
Yeah, and art students are so generous, so gifted. They're really so wonderful. Maybe not all of them, but the ones that are the true artists, they're unbelievable. I am in awe of my students.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And it seems so much innovation and originality that comes through that that can inspire all of us and whatnot. I'm also wondering, Carol, when you experience that that vastness, that kind of getting closer to the void, when you're doing the silver point drawing, is there anything else in life in general? Doesn't have to be related to art, or it could be or science. Is there anything else in life that brings you that same feeling?
Hiking. Yeah. I like just physical work, arduous physical work. Yeah.
And I had one other question also, Carol, because when we first started the show, you had kind of mentioned that your parents kind of had a trajectory for you. So then when you took this class in drawing, kind of going back to the dorm room, and then she was taking this drawing class, and then you kind of joined up in the drawing class. And then you started to feel wow, there's this resonance, and then you had that amazing teacher also that really encouraged you. Now, when you brought this information back to your parents, because now it kind of seemed like this might be a path for me to explore, were they open about that? Was that kind of no? Okay.
Right. No. I was raised in a very strict religious upbringing. My father had elder. I mean, what they really wanted me to do was be a missionary. And then they were accepting that maybe I would be a nurse. But contrary to them, I went away to school pre-med chemistry, which then they learned to accept. So that was a big break already. So then when I moved to art, then that was that. So, but I did pay for my own education, and I made my own decisions.
Carol, we're going to need to wrap the show up. I'm so grateful for all that you've shared with your art and your passion, and also with your teaching. I know you're an amazing, amazing professor, and I know that you've inspired, so many students. We'd like to offer you some closing comments, whatever you would like to share to wrap up the show. And then if you could let us know how we can stay connected with you.
Okay, great. Yeah, certainly people can find me through Facebook or my website. And can email me through my website as well. So some closing thoughts. I took a creative capital workshop, and something they did there that I hold on to is they said, okay, and this sounds really kind of dreary, but they said, you're on your deathbed, what do you regret? And so you go through the things that you would regret, and like you're like, oh, I would regret if I wasn't a nice person. I would regret if I didn't vote. I would regret I didn't care for my family. And then, certainly I would regret that I didn't make the art that was in me to make, And so, the minute, and nobody puts on their list of regrets that they regret they didn't make more money selling art, right? So I offered this to other artists out there that, you to find your own sense of success and to offer perspective. You're on your deathbed and just ask yourself what you would regret, because then it puts you back on the path to living your life the way you need to live it without regret.
Yeah, those are great closing comments. That authenticity and kind of, honoring your own voice. Yes, that's beautiful. Carol, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your art and your creative process, and this whole world that is just so amazing. Of your art, that what you've created, it's just so brilliant and breathtaking, and all that you put into it. Thank you so much for sharing so much about you and your art.
Well, thank you. Thank you for what you do to actually promote artists and open up our world to conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carol. I appreciate that. And thank you again for being our guest artist today on Art and Talk. Thank you, everybody, for watching Art and Talk today. And again, please make sure, if you're local to South Florida, or if maybe you're just traveling through the area, you definitely want to stop by and check out the biennial exhibit. And again, that's at the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County in Lake Worth, Florida. And again, check out our Facebook page, and we'll have a link where you can read a little bit more information about this if you're not local. And thank you so much for watching, everyone. Carol, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful art. Thank you again, everybody, for watching, and we'll talk soon. Until then, be well and be blessed.